Welcome to Live with Lacey for my Military Appreciation Month celebration. I'm Lacey Langford, the military money expert. I help the military community make, save, and invest money wisely. And in honor of Military Appreciation Month, I'm doing live shows every Monday, Wednesday, Friday throughout the month on military life, money, and entrepreneurship. On every Tuesday, I'm hosting a fun giveaway. Right now, you can enter for a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And on Thursdays, I'm releasing how-to videos. So new one will be dropping tomorrow. To find out the latest on all of the monthly activities, you can find and follow me on Twitter at Finance Lacey and the Military Money Expert on YouTube and Facebook. Support for my Military Appreciation Month celebration comes from Self. With Self, you can open a credit builder account, pay monthly, and on time to build positive payment history. Visit self.inc to learn more. All right, now it's time for my guest. Today, Daniel Kopp, who's a CFP. He's a fee-only fiduciary financial planner and founder of Wise Stewardship Financial Planning, where he helps young widows and widowers, as well as service members, organize their financial lives by aligning their money with their deeply held values. He's an Air Force veteran. After almost 9 years as an officer on active duty, he loves helping his fellow military optimize their money with what's important now and for years to come. So wherever you're watching, please clap loudly for my friend, Daniel Kopp. Welcome.
Hi, Lacey. It's so great to be here with you. Your energy is just always so inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it made it easier today because I knew it was you. So I knew we were going to have fun. So I was ready for it, looking forward to it. Especially, we're going to be talking about investing, and you are a whiz with this. So I thought you would be the perfect guest.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm so excited to talk about this topic today because really this is about planning for yourself, that idea of paying yourself first. And when we talk about this, there's this tension that sometimes people have, or fear, sometimes anxiety around money. So hopefully today, the topics we talk about will be able to break through some of that or inspire action so that you can, like we said at the intro there, align money with your values. What's important to you?
Yes, agree. I think the word investing scares people.
Understandably so, right? There's a lot of anxiety that can come around that. So if you feel that, you're not alone. All right. That is a common thing that I talk to people about.
Faux show, you're not alone. Well, let me start with my first question. What are the core principles of investing that people should know? Because there's a lot of terminology and it can be even overwhelming, I think, for financial professionals. So somebody that's not in this world, what are the basics that are the most important?
Yeah, that is a great question to start with. And as we go throughout the topics today, understand that, we're not making any specific recommendations to your situation here, but these are some of the foundational principles that you can consider and apply in your own situation. Number one, what is the purpose? Some people might say, what is the goal? Like, why are you thinking about investing? What is that money going to be used for? Sometimes you can segment that by the second point, which is timeline. Like, are we talking about something short-term in the next 0 to 5 years, maybe 5 to 10 years, or beyond that? Beyond 10 years. And then the third principle would be risk tolerance. Okay. Now I'm going to break this down. Like, how do you feel? There are some tools out there that can kind of put a quote unquote number, a math figure on this. But with that, so purpose, goal, like, let's break this down with an example. Maybe you are thinking about saving for retirement. Great goal. Like something, especially for those who are in the military right now, maybe 10, 20, 30 years away from that point in time. So you're defining by the purpose. Why am I going to do this? You're defining by the timeline. And then the risk tolerance, like, how would I feel? Well, if something's 10, 20, 30 years away, notionally, hopefully, that little bit of anxiety about what the markets might do in the meantime is a little bit less because there's time for that money to grow. Okay, so figure out your purpose, figure out your timeline, and then figure out your risk tolerance. And those three kind of go together with some of the core principles that you should start with.
Those are good ones. And that's not overwhelming. Those are, some basic things that I think are unique to you. Yes, they may be similar to other people, but your timeline, what your goals are that works best for you and your family. So I think those are good core principles. Now, go ahead.
I was going to say too, so those are the kind of the foundational principles. There are some outer lying principles that could go along with that as well. One of them is certainly to try to keep investment expenses, investment costs low. All right. So a great example of course is the TSP, one of the lowest cost 401k, that qualified retirement plan expenses out there. You're paying, 0.05%, something like that. So really, really low. Fortunately, due to fee compression, so a lot of investment fees have come down other places. So if you go to like one of the other major custodians like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, and look at their index fund option, you're going to pay something very, very low. So that'd be another core investing principle to apply here.
Well, that leads right into my next question, which is, where do you invest the money? When somebody's starting out, I think we just kind of know that information, but it's like having all the ingredients lined up to understand how it's all going to come together in the end. So where can you invest the money? Where does it get deposited? It's just not, oh, well, I say I'm investing. You gave an example of
Yes.
the TSP. Where does the actual money get invested?
Yeah, so the thrift savings plan, the TSP, is going to be the best option, the default option for the majority of our listeners today, especially for those enrolled in the BRS, the blended retirement system. All right. Make sure that you're getting your 5% in there to get your full match. All right. So the TSP, one, if you don't already have an account set up, you can go do that, tsp.gov. And then for most of them, you're going to have the withholding set through DFAS. I forget what the Marine Corps online, MOL
Marine
online.
One or Marine
Something like that,
Marine
where you log
Online.
in.
Marine One's a helicopter. Marine Online.
MOL, Marine Online, yeah. So that gives the opportunity where you go and you set the paycheck deferral, okay? So you're not like making a transfer from your bank account. You're actually saying, I want X percentage withheld from my paycheck to go into the TSP. And again, if you're in the BRS, absolutely make sure that you've got that 5% set so that you're not missing out on free money, that match from the DoD. So that's the first way. And the second way, so maybe you've already done that with your TSP. And for those of you who are super savers out there, super investors, maybe you're already maxing out, contributing the full amount, which for tax year 2021 here is $19,500. So maybe you're on deployment or you got a bonus and you put it into the TSP. So the next best place to consider would be a Roth IRA. For most of the active duty military, you're in a lower tax bracket because your BAH, your BAS are not taxed. So that gives you the opportunity to take advantage of a potentially lower tax bracket situation. Everyone's situation may be different, but this is a good principle to start with, where you can go to those major custodians like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, and quickly and easily open up a Roth IRA account there. Right now, you can put up to $6,000 a year into a Roth IRA, provided that you have the earned income. Now, let me make a special point here for spousal IRAs, because this is a question that comes up. So say you've got an active duty member, right? They're working, maybe they're contributing to the TSP, and they're married to somebody who maybe has a job or maybe is in between jobs or dealing with the challenges associated with the moving around a military life, right? That spouse can contribute the full $6,000 in their Roth IRA based on their active duty partner, active duty spouse's earnings. You don't have to have your own earned income so long as you're filing jointly with your taxes. So then it's just a simple paycheck. Not a paycheck deferral like TSP, automatic bank transfer. So you can just transfer the money over from that way. So that's the way you get started, right? And now in the TSP, if you're not even sure where to go from, there's a lot of educational materials there on tsp.gov, but a life cycle fund is typically the default option if you don't pick anything. So something like 2050, 2055, you could look at what years you might be needing to withdraw the money. And by that, I don't mean military retirement per se, but when you're no longer going to be working. And the TSP automatically rebalances, so they diversify it for you. So they're going to invest in large U.S. companies, the C fund, smaller U.S. companies, the S fund, international companies, the I fund, and then a little bit of bonds through the F and G. That is a great place to start. And those major custodians I mentioned, Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, they'll have an equivalent target date fund that would be worth taking a look at as well.
Love those. I kind of want to pull together my first question and my second question. So in your answer, you were saying that you have to have your goal and the timeline, and you're deciding where you're going to put the money in. When it comes to the goal setting, let's say you're maybe more short term, like you're trying to save up $20,000 for a down payment on a house.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And maybe you want to invest it that way. How do you align your goals and all the investing and like pull it together tight? I'm trying to visualize that.
Super important point. We didn't make this earlier. When you're investing or thinking about a short-term goal, so by that we define 0 to 5 years, this is not something that you want to be putting your money into the stock market. The stock market has volatility, has ups and downs that might make that an inappropriate place. Like, how would you feel if you put that 20,000 in and, 3 years from now we've had a bad market or a correction and now it's 15 or 12,000, right? Most people would not feel very good. And that goes back to that risk tolerance thing that we talked about. So goal setting is being clear about the purpose and the why and adjusting the timeline. 0 to 5 years, keep it in cash, keep it in short-term CDs, things like that. Maybe super high quality bond fund, but you definitely don't be putting it into stocks. All right. That's probably not appropriate for you. For those longer term goals, 10 plus years, that's where your goal based, your timeline allows you to look at something like putting more of the investments into stocks. Does that help answer your question and clarify that a little bit?
Yes. Because I think that's important, is to know where you're going with it.
Yeah.
What the align and everything, because there's different types of investing and savings that you have, and having them working together instead of all going in separate directions, I think is helpful for a long-term strategy.
Yeah. And for most military members, even though they may not need as large of an emergency fund as a civilian equivalent, the rule of thumb outside of the military world is at least 6 months of living expenses. Military, you're not worried about getting a pink slip on Monday, or at least with immediate effect. So maybe you don't need so much, but everyone does need some level of an emergency fund. And emergency funds certainly should not be invested in the stock market, right? That should be held in a bank account securely, that is ready to be there if and when you need it.
Yes. Because, like 2014, what was it? The force reduction, they were letting people know, hey, you've got 3 to 6 months to get out and you aren't eligible for a retirement. That's not, like you said, immediate, and you got a little bit of money walking out the door, but that's not, if you were planning on retiring from the military, that's probably going to be a big shock for your system.
Yeah. When I talk to people about that, it always comes down to, what's your swan factor? Sleep well at night, right? There's a super important point that your financial plan should reflect the unique things about your life, right? It goes back to the values discussion earlier. There may not be a math answer to this question. There may be what's right for you with this question.
That is a great description, because I've had situations like that where it's like, I get back up and be like, we need to talk about this. Like, I can't go to bed until
yes.
We've got this sorted out. Or it's just, it doesn't, sometimes financial decisions for me is my gut goes into it and like what I'm comfortable with. And I'm like, I know that probably doesn't make sense to other people, but I can't go to sleep, or it's putting a knot in my stomach. So that's not the way for us to move forward. Even if it makes sense for other people, but I'm not sleeping, like you said. So.
Oh, that goes to what I tell clients all the time, right? Money is not really about dollars and cents. It's about hopes and fears and dreams, right? So with these goals, recognize that it's not just about the money. It's about the importance that you attach onto it. And if you visualize like, kind of a sine wave, there's the optimism, elation. Oh, market's going up. Woo, yay. And then last year, think back to even just recently, the coronavirus pandemic, the market's falling, right? Nervousness, fear, anxiety, and then it repeats over and over and over and over again. And if you allow your emotions to dictate these things rather than purpose, goal, your why, the timeline, and then taking into consider your risk tolerance, right? Don't allow the emotions to dictate this, right? Go back to what's important, which is why I recommend everybody write this stuff down, why you are doing what you're doing. Because when you are afraid, or when you are forgetful, I am as well, you go back and you look at, oh, that's right, I wrote this down, and remind yourself of that. Sometimes maybe even have an accountability partner, right? Spouse is a great one to do that. But if you don't have that, find someone else who you can talk openly and honestly about this with.
Yes. But be mindful of different risk tolerances. My husband has a much higher risk tolerance than I do. And so he's like, let's just do it. And I'm like, no, like, we need more knowledge. We need to do some more research. We need to. Yeah. So he's like, let's just wing it. So we're definitely different in that. All this information is great, but we're talking about in a very short amount of time. How can people increase their own knowledge in a good way? Because there's a lot of information on Reddit, but sometimes that's not the best way to make decisions, and that has a lot of that emotional factor you were talking about. So how can people find good information, or what's good for them? Because I think everybody has a different learning style. So what are some ideas on that?
One of the favorite books that I have read recently about investing, and I've been giving it as a gift to a lot of people, is Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. And his last name is spelled Housel, The Psychology of Money. Fantastic book. Really gets into that brain, heart, mind, emotion connection as it relates to money. He's a really good writer, and I mean, it's well worth your time. Highly, highly recommend. If you have already read that, or maybe wanted something else, J.L. Collins, The Simple Path to Wealth, great book to kind of get started in this investing journey. And for those in the military, of course, in the military space, Doug Nordman's The Military Guide to Financial Independence, and of course, his blog, The Military Guide. Great place to start. If you want more blog content, The Military Wallet, of course, Kate Horrell's website, Lacey, your own website. All these are great places to start and learn more about each of these topics.
Also, your website. I'm going to go ahead and put a plug for that.
I don't have as much content there. But,
yes. But it's a good source of information if you have to ask questions. I think those are all really great. I just interviewed somebody for the show, and they also recommended The Psychology of Money. And I've never read that, so I feel like that's a sign that I need to read it.
It is well worth everyone's time. Like everything I just said, if you only have time for one, read that one.
Yes. And I want to say I'm not sure. I gotta look because who said that, but I'll definitely put that in my queue of things to read. So those are all great resources to help people increase their knowledge. What are some common mistakes people make when it comes to investing? I'm all about that, is learning from other people's mistakes so I don't have the financial impact or the stress of it.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier, letting emotion dictate long-term investing decisions. Morgan Housel, one of the things that he talks about in that book is the idea that the biggest risk is always the one that no one's talking about, because if no one's talking about it, they're not necessarily prepared for it. And then risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin, right? In order to get those returns that the stock market can deliver, you have to be willing to accept the volatility, the ups and downs that come along with it. To get the return, you have to be able to accept the risk, right? And there's a tension there. So, going back to the purpose, why are you doing what you're doing? So that when the market's falling, you're not freaking out. You're not browsing some Facebook group, listening to them tell you what to do about it, or, what your brother-in-law said to do, right? Knowing your purpose, okay? Because if we look at the record, so let's look at some historical data. There have been multiple times where the market had many parts of its return delivered in just a few short days. So if you go back and we look from 1990 to 2018 in the S&P 500, and you held the market that whole time, you earned about a 9.29% return. And the source of this is from Dimensional Fund Advisors. If you missed just the 5 best market days over a 30-year period, your return fell from 9.29 to 7.75%. You missed out. So because market timing is impossible, no one has a crystal ball. And if they say they know it's coming, they're lying. Or they certainly couldn't afford their fee, even if it was true, right? But if you miss even just a few of the market's best days over a 30-year period, you're putting yourself way behind. So just stick to a long-term plan, set it, sometimes forget it, right? That can even be better. And just trust the process. Trust the process.
Yeah. I feel like more and more with things like Reddit, with Facebook, Twitter, social media, the emotional factor is really hard for some people to ignore, especially if that's where you spend your time. Like, I'm not really into social media that much as something for my free time, but people are watching and seeing, okay, well, I'm selling, I'm buying. And I think they start to think, okay, well, if this many people are saying it, I should do it. But also there's people that think the only way to invest is to buy stocks.
Yeah.
They don't realize investing actually is putting the money in your TSP or your 401k or an IRA. You don't have to buy individual stocks. And so I think there's this confusion on, oh my goodness, a good example is with GameStop. That was all over the news.
Yes, big year.
Yeah, yes. And so people that have never even probably heard of GameStop didn't know it was like a store, where you could buy video games and equipment and stuff. All of a sudden they're like, what's GameStop? Should I be buying GameStop stock? Which, by the way, I think is so tongue tying. GameStop stock. GameStop stock. Yes. But it's really hard if you don't have that basic information. We're talking about increase your investing knowledge, that to understand, hey, investing is, you could buy an index fund and be in for the long haul versus going and buying individual stocks. That is one way to invest, but maybe not the way that aligns with your goals.
Yeah, and I had a client ask me recently, well, I want to own stock X. I was like, oh, you already do? They're like, oh, really? I went and showed them their TSP, and I explained the C fund represents the S&P 500, the 500 largest U.S. companies. So all the big names, Amazon and Disney and Google and Facebook and Tesla and all these companies, they're a part of that. And then you have the S fund, which is the smaller cap. So those are the ones below that top 500. So roughly the 2,500 smaller cap stocks below that. So you own all those stocks in proportion to their share in the market. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy individual stocks. Now, if you want to go trade, right, keep it to less than 5% of your net worth. So maybe you have a little play fund account and you do a little bit of there, but you separate. That's more like the game. That's more the fun stuff than the long-term, steady Eddie, low-cost index fund investing that'll set you up for success more over that time period. So segmenting those ideas in your mind is critically important too.
Yes, I'm glad that you pointed that out and put a percentage on it, that you can separate that out. It'd be a little bit more play money in your investment. That's like going on a vacation to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
You wouldn't take all of your food money and, hotel money and put it on the table to bet. You'd only take a small portion of the money you have to spend and gamble with it. It wouldn't be your entire vacation fund, because that could turn out horrible, where you might not have food, you might not be able to pay your hotel bill. So I think that's good to know that it's separate, that there's these buckets that you can still do that, but understand the function of it in your overall strategy.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other last tips for people that are wanting to invest, but maybe a little bit nervous? People maybe that are doing the TSP, but want to learn more and kind of get out there.
So a great place, of course, is just reaching out to your local on-base counselors. Take advantage of the resources that are there. Many of them times they'll have a TSP class or something related to those things where you can ask questions. Experts online like us, there are great groups out there where you can get information, not like the financial circus that can be out there in the media sometimes, but finding the ability to look to a trusted expert, a trusted resource. AFC, accredited financial counselors, CFPs, people like that. There's a lot of free information out there if you want to learn. Sometimes the challenge is more the curation of it. But
that's a good point.
Be patient with yourself. Take the time to learn. The last thing I'll say is, like, how much should you be saving? That's such a personal question, right? And I get asked that. How much should you be investing? Military have a unique opportunity, especially if you're planning to stay for the pension and things like that. But, a rule of thumb, which like all rules of thumb should be taken with a grain of salt, is, 15% of your gross pay. So before taxes. So when you look at your base pay before taxes plus BH, BS on top of that, it would be about 15% that you would save towards these long-term retirement type goals. So 50,000 salary all in with all your extra benefits would be about $7,500 a year towards that. So if you want to use it as a starting point, obviously you could save more. People who save less understand some of the trade-offs with that.
I love that you say that. It's personal finance is so personal. Yeah. That's what everything is. Well, there's a rule of thumb, but it depends. And I feel like it depends is always in the answer.
I actually had that in my email that I sent out today. Yes. Cue the groans. It depends.
Yes, it really does. And some of it, again, is you have to sleep with it. So it may be a crystal clear plan, but for whatever reason, something's in the pipeline. And I've learned through coaching that sometimes there's things that people have not even said out loud yet, that they, maybe they're going to have another baby. Maybe they're going to get divorced. Maybe. And so they haven't really come to terms with whatever that is. And maybe that thing in the back of their mind is the thing that makes them not sleep with that decision.
Yeah. Black Ops budgets. Isn't that what you call it before?
Yes. I do like to give people that out. It's like, okay, you don't have to name it, but let's plan for it. And you don't have to explain it to me. It's just, but everything, you should have a plan for it. That's why Black Ops still has a budget. Mm-hmm. I like to think they do. I'd like to think that Black Ops have budgets. So.
There's unique funding methods there as well. Say.
Yes. It comes from somewhere. Well, I want to ask you, what is the peak of your service?
Oh man, when you told me to prepare for this question, I was definitely multiple experiences stand out. One of them certainly is a highlight was actually during survival school training. So I was out at Fairchild Air Force Base, having completed SEER and gone through the portion where experienced some interrogation and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly at one point to be totally surprised turn it around and the flag's there, and to hear the anthem, and just the wave of emotion that came over of like, wow, everything that this great country represents. And, I think of the amazing men and women that I got to serve alongside, follow and lead. The military creates a special bond that's found very few other places. And although I'm no longer actively serving, the bonds continue beyond that. And when I think back over service, like that was clearly a highlight of, wow, what this experience represents and the people that I get to do it with.
Yes, that's a great one. I think everybody has a moment. It's like almost like goosebumps down your back or a lightning bolt. It's like, wow, this is amazing. And you're right. It is a bond that it's just hard to explain if you've never served or never been a military spouse. Like I think there's a special bond between military spouses.
Military families get it too.
Yes. Oh yeah. Like we are still friends with people that I was stationed with when I was like 4 and 5 years old in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's crazy that, in our families are all, so when we get together, it's like, okay, hey, anyway, they just get it. And it's neat to see the journey, like from a childhood in the military to now we're all adults and have our own careers. And some of it is associated with military and government, but some of it isn't. So I love that story. I want to ask you real quick. Do you have a favorite PCS or deployment story? Like sometimes there's some craziness that goes on with any of those.
I'm certainly not as crazy as some of the stories out there. I mean, the last PCS that I did was from Robbins Air Force Base to Mountain Home out in Idaho. So from Georgia to Idaho, but I had a TDY en route at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, which extended and delayed and delayed and delayed. And then we were trying to buy a house at the time, so we didn't able to. There was housing shortage. We had to have an extra expense, short-term rental. We get to finally in Mountain Home, and the TLF is out of rooms. We'd had a reservation on the book for months. Like they put us up in some extra spare room right over the boiler that they had found. Like it was just a cacophony of errors, one after the other. But the amazing thing is, the Air Force family stepped up, right? I reached out, I asked for help, I informed them what was going on. And when we needed the support for when stuff did arrive and when we finally were able to move into a house. So just a reminder, going back to what I said, like the amazing people that I got to serve alongside in the way that they took care of me and my family.
Yes, that's so true. I think service members get it, and military spouses, that you have to be ready for whatever. There's always got to be a
Flexible,
contingency. Yeah.
Semper Gumby.
Yes. If you're PCSing, something's going to go wrong. Just heads up, it's going to happen. It's how many and how much and the time and stress. And my mom's favorite story, not favorite, but one of her stories was people that we knew. They got orders and they left, and I forget where they were going, some Army base. And they arrived, and as soon as they got there, they're like, "We're going to PCS you somewhere else." So it wasn't even back to where they just came from. And so all their stuff was en route to get delivered there. And they're like, "No, now we need you to go like to the West Coast." And so you just got to be ready for whatever. And so I always had the policy of I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I had 3 weeks before orders scheduled to go to Okinawa, and 3 weeks before the movers showed up, they canceled those. So yeah, I've been there too.
Yes. We had to get out of Benning, I think in 7 or 8 days. And so It was like, okay, yeah, we could do it. So that's what people are like, I don't know if we're going to get out of here in time. I'm like, oh, they can make it happen. If they want you gone, they'll get you out of there.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Well, can you tell everybody watching where they can learn more about you?
Yes. Well, thank you, Lacey, for having me on today. It's a privilege to be here. I've been on several episodes of your podcast, in fact. But as far as what I'm doing right now, working with military clients, Wise Stewardship FP, foxtrotpapa.com/military-life-planning. So that's the best place to learn more about the current work that I'm doing. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, things like that, if you want to follow me there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Lacey. It's been a privilege as always.
All right. I also want to say thank you to Self for the work they do to help others build credit and savings. To learn more about Self and their credit builder accounts, visit self.inc. I always appreciate their support in my Military Appreciation Month celebration. You can find links to find me and Daniel and Self on social media in the description below. You can get all the information about the giveaways, the next live with Lacey, and my how-to videos on Twitter at Finance Lacey, and Facebook and YouTube under the Military Money Expert. Be sure to tune in for Live with Lacey on Friday. I'm going to be talking with Pam Bergson from Tailwind Financial Planning. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you on Friday.